Hey guys, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. Welcome to Marketing Monday. I am here with Courtney with Sage Age, and I'm actually crazy happy about this. We're gonna talk about the difference between great communities and she'd probably kill me if I said terrible communities. So we're gonna talk about great communities and not so great communities. But first, this. Hey, Courtney,
Hi,
how are you?
I'm great. I love your energy.
Thank you. I am. It's one of I don't know where it comes from, but I wake up and I'm excited and I'm pumped up. Last night I was thinking about all these articles. I want to write about the industry and how great it is and how sometimes we miss that. So that really leads right into this. We're going to talk about the sort of the difference between great and not so great communities. But in order to sort of set the context, I want to have you talk for just a minute about who Sage Age is and what you do at Sage Age.
Absolutely. So, Sage Age is a full service marketing agency, and there are multiple arms. So, there's the advertising agency, which is digital, collateral, everything that you think of when you think of a marketing agency. Then there is the demand side, which does demand studies, mystery shops. And then there's also the consulting side. And so I am part of the consulting team. And what we do is we go in and we help communities who either want to really improve their census, or they have a new expansion coming up, or they just want to find out what they could do to be a little bit better.
So I think you're being a little bit generous there. How about want to be a lot better?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, some communities are planners. And so they want a consultant to be there and be another set of eyes that looks in and says, what can we do to be a little bit better and to improve our best practices so that maybe they can do an expansion or so that they can get to 100% when they're at 95%. And so those are the people that we're really going to focus on today who really are great. And then there are others who have been struggling for years and they have implemented a lot of best practices, but they're still struggling. And that's where, if they implement some of the things that we talk about today, they can get to that next level.
Terrific. So one of the things that I find fascinating, and I don't know, maybe it was you I was talking to as we were prepping for the call, or somebody, but one of the things that I find to be really curious is that it's often the high performing companies that spend the money on things like consultants like you to come into a community where in some sense you look at it and say, well, they actually need it less than these low performing companies, but it's part of their whole ethos of thinking we just got to get better, we got to get better, we got to get better, and it makes perfect sense to me. I'm deeply in a book about storytelling, and I think I'm a pretty good storyteller. But I'm deep into this book about storytelling because I just want to get better and better and better. And so I see that the really good communities are doing this. So let's actually start by let's just talk a little bit about the difference between bad and good, or good and not so great, great and not so great communities. And I'm going to sort of turn that over to you. And what do you see?
Well, I love this topic because it really is pretty simple. Like you said, the people that are willing to spend the money think differently. And so when we talked about this topic, I thought about it in 4 different words. So operationally, it is people who focus on their product, who focus on their programs, who focus on their processes, and who focus on approvals. And it really does come from the top down. So it's someone who thinks differently and who thinks this might not, we're going to spend a lot of money right now and we're not going to get it back right away, but it's going to make the difference for us in the future and moving forward. So it's people who are thinking outside of the box, who think differently, and who really focus on those 4 different pieces. And we can go into those if you'd like.
I would. So let's start. So the first one is operations.
So I was thinking of operations as an umbrella, and then looking at the product, the processes, programs, and approvals.
Okay. So
So
let's hit the first one and let's just talk through that.
absolutely. So one is product. And this is not to say you have to go and build a brand new building and you have to update all your finishes and do all the new renovations. This is really saying that from the top, your operations people focus on your product as much as your marketing people, and you take a realistic look at your product. So, are you serving good meals? Are your finishes constantly being reviewed? Do you know who your competitors are and what you're up against? Are you looking at your competitors' pricing? Are you looking at what they're doing, and seeing how you can always stay a little bit ahead? And one way I like to think about it is even the Reese's peanut butter cup, which is amazing and delicious and timeless, even they reinvented themselves. So they put little Reese's pieces inside of it, and they put, I think, chips inside of it. And then they did white chocolate. So your product can be amazing, but you always have to think ahead because somebody else is always thinking ahead. So definitely product. Should we go to the next one?
Well, I want to actually talk a little bit more about product first. I think
Mhm.
that from my perspective, I over the last few weeks I've been in a couple or three communities, and it's been really I find that I learn a lot when I go into communities. And to me, I tend to think of it as sort of the overall resident experience. So I was in two communities in 1 week. I had lunch with somebody who was unhappy with his community and was going to move to another community. He just wanted me to experience the place where he was unhappy, and I could see why he was unhappy. What the food, sort of the food selections weren't terrific, but the worst part about it was that we waited at the dining room table for 20 minutes before anybody came over and asked us if we wanted coffee or drinks. And what really struck me about it was that he and the other resident I was with were going nuts about it, which tells me that's their standard. And it's a terrible standard. And so the question I kind of find myself thinking is, how would you feel if you moved here? I mean, would you be happy with the level of service? And it's not just the service, it's the overall experience. And the other part related to that is that he had been in this community 7 years when he decided to move out. And the thing that struck me was what he didn't tell me, and that was that he'd miss his friends. So I'm looking at that and thinking, how can you be in this building for 7 years and not have these deep relationships? So,
Right.
any thoughts on all of that? And then we'll move on.
Absolutely. I think that's super sad. I think you have to look at it through a lens of what can we improve upon all the time, and being open to consistent feedback, because that sounds like someone that could have easily stayed at that community had they been open to realistic feedback. And again, that's something that we go in and look at all the time. I'll look through move outs and I'll see 7 people went home this year. That's a big red flag. So that to me speaks to the operations and the satisfaction. And I think anyone could do that. Anyone can look at that through that lens. And the other piece is, I know we're talking about what makes a community great. I'm looking at it through what makes a community great that will help your sales.
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. So let's take the next category.
Absolutely. So what do we covered? Product, also processes. So processes are huge. In communities that produce, they all have processes. In communities that struggle, their processes are struggling. So when I say processes, I mean, do you have some sort of a process for accountability for your sales activity? And sales activity would be call outs, tours, retours. How do your salespeople know how many calls they're supposed to make? Because as a salesperson, you can easily get pulled into so many other things. And I have been in sales, and I've been a salesperson who was pulled into other things. And I'd leave at the end of the day and I'd say, wow, I did a lot of work today. But was that work actually getting me toward a higher census? Probably not. So accountability tools, and those are things that we offer through our consulting services, are tools that help you figure out how many calls you have to make, how many tours you need to give. That also help you calculate your conversion rates and what your conversion rate goals should be. Also, looking at your compensation program. Are you compensating your sales team and other key leaders that help to bring in the sales and help to make the sales happen? Are you compensating them a good chunk on their performance? You will struggle if you give a high base and have low compensation, is my opinion. So definitely processes.
So can we talk a little bit more about, and I know it's going to vary a little bit depending on the product type, but can we talk a little bit about some of these ratios? So if I'm a salesperson in the community, how many calls should I be making a day or a week?
A lot. So actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because that is, I would say, 10 out of 10 times every community we go to, that is the biggest area where people struggle. People just don't know how many calls to make, and there's no magic bullet that makes up for calls. So it would probably be, we have a point system. So we are asking people to make anywhere between 20 to 40 calls a day.
Wow.
Yeah. And that does not mean you're going to get a call connect. So you might be leaving messages, but if you have 2 tours a day, then you're not going to have as much time for the calls, but you don't need as much time for the calls because tours are a much stronger sales activity.
And how long should a tour take?
No longer than 90 minutes to 2 hours. If you go beyond that, your prospect is exhausted and they're no longer taking in the information. So ask them to come back and say, we'll do this again, but I want to give your brain a break.
So I know we didn't talk about this, but this is always what happens. So let's actually dig a little deeper into this tour process. Talk to me about what a tour should look like.
So again, with processes, implementing best practices are super important. So that starts at the beginning with the receptionist greeting the person, saying, hello, we're so happy you're here. The receptionist knowing that the person's coming, doing a short, or not a short, actually, this is probably the longest part, is the discovery, which is really just a meeting. And you should already know about the person, having a really nice connection when you're talking, understanding what they're looking for, and then only showing them the parts that really matter to them during the tour, while also verifying that this is going to meet their needs. And then coming back, sitting down, talking again, finding out any objections, going over that, and then asking if they'd like to move in or if they'd like to move forward, but always securing a next step, always figuring out any barriers. And then, most importantly, following up within 24 hours.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the follow-up and what that looks like. Should it be phone? Should it be email? Should it be text? Something else? All of those?
I'm a big proponent of a voice to voice. I think connecting with people, but also letting them know you're going to call. So when they leave the tour, just saying, you know what, we went over so much today. I am going to give you a call tomorrow, if that's all right. Sleep on it. Think about everything you've seen. And the people that are coming to us have been to so many communities. And the number one thing we hear is, I cannot keep you all straight from the next person, from the next person. And so being that person to really stand out, to listen and to hear what they've said, and then to do a follow-up that's meaningful and shows you remembered something specific about them.
Courtney, I love this. One of the things I used to do a lot more tour of communities, sort of a mystery shopping kind of thing, much harder to do now. Often I get outed. But one of the things, and I still like to ask people this question, is what makes your community better than the guy down the street or the community down the street?
Mm-hmm.
And it breaks my heart, honestly, that so often people can't tell me that. And I think you've got to be able to make, I mean, we're all in this together, but when
Mhm.
you're touring a resident, they're going to move into your community and they're going to move into, or they're going to move into somebody else's community, or they're going to stay at home, right? And you've really got to highlight, how do you go about doing that?
I love that question so much. I think salespeople get into sales because they truly love working with seniors and they love their jobs. So the hard part is if they get too involved in operations, they can see some of the places where the community struggles. So I think it's super important to keep your salespeople out of operations and keep them believing because they have to speak the magic that is your community. And if they're in the operations, they might be stressed over someone's pants were missing today. And then when a family member comes in and says, "Are you going to keep track of my loved one's pants?" The salesperson wants to be honest. So making sure that your salespeople can stay focused on sales and only sales, and also helping them to believe by looking at your product, having honest feedback about your product with your operations person is super important. So yes, they should, and also canned answer, you should do a SWOT analysis so you know your strengths. Everyone should know your strengths.
Yeah. So I really love this sort of, you probably won't like me putting it this way, but this ignorance is bliss approach to it, because you're absolutely right. I talk to people about senior living and they want to talk about all the things that are wrong with their community, their organization, senior living, blah, 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 blah. And we spend a lot of time as an organization writing about those things. So this seems a little hypocritical as I talk about this, right? But at the end of the day, when I talk to people who are living in senior living communities, they're pretty happy. I mean, even this
Mhm.
guy that I talked about earlier that's leaving one community after 7 years, he's not going home. He's going to another community because it's a better life for him. And this is an
Mhm.
independent living resident. He still drives, he's still very active, but it's still a better life for him than being at home. So I love that.
100%.
So, okay. So what's number three? Have we
Okay,
crushed
so
process?
I think so. So processes are
Okay.
super important. If you don't have processes, I guarantee you're struggling.
Oh, I
Um,
actually have one more question about process.
sure.
Do you have any thoughts about ratios in terms of leads to move-ins or tours to move in, and what those numbers should look like?
I do. It's different based on life care versus rental versus
Sure.
independent memory care. So I would say anywhere between, for every tour, probably 30 to 40%, you should have a tour to move in ratio.
Okay.
And there are different benchmark reports. The next one, which that was a great segue, is programs. So, additionally, when I go in, another service that we offer is assessments. So, if someone is not meeting their occupancy goals or their covenant goals, we'll go in and we'll do a full in depth assessment with the team, look at how things are going, and write a report saying, here's what we recommend. On almost every single assessment I have done where someone is struggling, they have a horrible CRM. And you know what I'm saying when I say that? Yeah. Okay. So,
Yes, I do.
okay. So people are using their health record as their CRM, and the salespeople don't speak health language or health record language. They speak people language, and they need a user friendly CRM that speaks the same language as they speak and that can pull the reports to give them accurate data. So, the CRM should be used as a tool that's triggering your salespeople. I got to call out to these people because these are people who've expressed the most interest, and not get it lost in with health data. So for programs, 100% a good CRM.
Well, and I've always, I may have this wrong. I mean, you're the expert on this, but it's always seemed to me in my days of doing selling, not so much, some in senior living and some in other places, that the first thing I really need to do in the morning when I sit down is look at my CRM and see what I'm supposed to be working on today, who I'm supposed to be reaching out to, who maybe I didn't reach out to. Thoughts on that?
Yes, that is the purpose of a CRM. I love it. That's the purpose. And so many CRMs are so behind and so out of date, meaning their prospects haven't been touched in years. There's not a next step for every prospect. They're not sure, they aren't categorized correctly. So they're not sure which ones are hot, which ones are cool. So if there is a place to spend a good chunk of time or to bring in extra services, it would be to clean up your CRM and get it to a place where it's an actual functioning tool for your sales team.
So I want to dig into this a little deeper. I suspect I'd be willing to bet money on this to be true, that half, maybe more of the people who are watching this, who are in the sales part of senior living, have the CRM that has hundreds or thousands of names in them, most of whom haven't been touched, because all they're really doing is this first initial, this is a hot prospect, I'm going to move them in. And so I listened to you saying, Courtney says, oh, well, you should just go in and look at your CRM and use it and look at all those people who haven't been touched. Where do you start? Because I agree with you, by the way. I'm not arguing with you at all. I think it's 100% the right thing to do. But where do you start when you've got that kind of a situation?
I think you have to look at who's available to make the calls. So if you only have a certain amount of staff people who are trained in sales, you want to give them the hottest leads. Then if you have an intern or someone who's not as trained, those are the people that are going to take folks who have come into your system 5+ years ago, because the chances that they've gone somewhere else are probably pretty high. And so you're not going to need as much skill. The other thing is that there are companies that we work with that will run your database through the national change of address, or find out if someone has passed away, and that might clean out a nice chunk, so you don't have to waste time on calling.
Okay, so it's just but it's a matter of, you kind of got to start someplace, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the next thing is,
so the next one is approvals. And so that goes back to the first comment you made, where if you're willing to bring on a consultant, you're probably the person who's also going to give approvals for various items. So salespeople in marketing and sales are known for asking for a lot, right? And so I think operations people are like, all right, you're asking me for something else again. But really listening, and if your salesperson is saying this is what the market wants, trying to remove any barriers and giving more approvals and saying yes more often. So make a path to make the magic happen, really, is what approvals means.
So can you maybe give me a couple of specific examples of what you're talking about?
Absolutely. And I keep picturing this one community in my head. So I've been working with this community. They have a really excellent CEO. I don't think I've heard him say no to anything that we've proposed. And their census has gone way up. So it's really cool. So let's say we need a second model apartment. Okay, make it happen. We need the team to do a first impressions tour, and we need all of these first impressions to be improved. All right, he's going to make it happen, and he's going to hold people accountable. We need to have a guest suite for a staycation apartment. Fine, done. We're going to make it happen. We need someone to make calls into the database. And we're talking kind of like you had asked, we need someone to call the leads that haven't been touched in years. They're not strong leads. Okay, then let's bring on the retired receptionist. So making things happen, thinking outside of the box, understanding the need for it, and saying yes.
Cool. Yeah, I think that, it's so hard, right? Because people get into this mindset of saying no, and it just becomes easier to say no. Once I say no, I have no more problems, right?
Mm-hmm.
Except for this one big problem that you can't even see that's above my head, right? Which is not having enough occupancy. And I think that sometimes that we eliminate the hassles, but in eliminating the hassles, we eliminate lots of good stuff as well. So, can you maybe? I want to. The other thing I'd really love to have you talk about is I'd like to do a little bit of storytelling. And I'd love to have you just talk about where you've gone into a community that needed some help, kind of walk me through what you've done and the results that you've had. You sort of told me one on this approvals process, and maybe you can even take that one and sort of talk about what the change in numbers are. But I love I love success stories.
Absolutely. Sure. Let's do that one. I'm really proud of them. They were very open to it. They started out with a census in the 80s, low 80s, and now they're in the mid 90s. And it was really nuts to bolts. What is that? Soup to nuts? I don't
Yes.
know what it is. Yeah, soup to nuts. So I always start out with an assessment because I want to know where we're at. And then I interview staff, I do a walkthrough, I look through the CRM, and all of it needed improved. I also look at sales structure. So, is your sales team operating in the best possible positions? Do their positions make sense? They didn't have a move-in coordinator. It's a life care community. They needed a move-in coordinator. So, making sure the staffing was correct, making sure the resources were correct. Looked at their contracts. They had areas where they could actually add in additional fees that a lot of places were charging, but they weren't. So also looking to see how we can help make them some money. Set up a discovery room for them, a model apartment, improve first impressions, changed up the touring and where they were touring. I mean, added the processes and the tools, cleaned up their CRM. You named it, we did. You name it, we did it. So still
So I
going.
want to I love this, and so you went so I want to talk about teams relative to this for just a second. Do you find that when you go in, it's that sometimes that it's mostly that salespeople just shouldn't are in the wrong position, or do you think is it more? Do you find mostly they just need help in terms of how they do their job?
A good chunk of it is that they just need processes. They need these four things. They need their product to be on par with the market. They need processes put in place. They need a better CRM for their program, and they need more approvals from their ops people. That's really it. Like if you'd boil it down and put it in a nutshell, that's it. You have a lot of really hardworking, dedicated salespeople that maybe don't have the right tools. Sometimes people are in the wrong position, but sometimes they just need the tools. And a big part of what I do is also getting the buy-in. So bringing ops people together with marketing people and getting the marketing people to believe and getting each other to sell the idea and all work together. And that's really the beauty when things start happening.
Well, and I think we talked a little bit as we were prepping this idea that sort of everybody has got to be selling. How do you get the rest of the team that are not salespeople actually to buy into this whole process? They're part of what it takes to get it full.
That can be really challenging, and that really does need the partnership of your operations team. But also, I think all the other departments work so hard, and so really calling them out and highlighting how they helped with a marketing event and saying thank you so much. Or if you're having a lunch during a marketing event, bring out your dining team, your chef, thank them in public. Your activities person, thank them for all that they're putting on. Your receptionist who's greeting people, just showing them the impact that they're making. And then when the prospects come back or they move in and they thank them, plus the excitement. When your census is higher, you usually get more staff, you get more perks. So always celebrating any of the smallest increases, but also remembering that more can be done when there's more money.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm not sure. Do you have one more story for me?
Yes, I'm sure I can come up with one. I do. Hold on.
Because I was thinking we talked about a couple. If not, we're about out of time. But I want to make sure I get the second story in if you have that.
Um, there was also another community that we went into. Some of their residents were just leaving way too early, and so getting them to think through, like, maybe we need to bring on hospice services or start keeping people. Um, and that was a situation where they moved around some of their salespeople. They had to they had a great CRM. They just needed to start using it and tracking the successes of what were happening. We also check into reputation. And so, based on everything online, it looked like they had a poor reputation. But when we called the professionals to find out what's your reputation like, it was good. And so, kind of piecing the story together of like, okay, it sounds like your director of nursing is dropping the ball on a lot of things, and it's impacting your reputation online. So you need to do a blitz to improve your online reputation. And then check back in a year later, and they've drastically improved, started to use their CRM, improve their reputation, changed out some of their operations folks, like their director of nursing, and their customer service is better. So it's every place is so different, but when you look at it, it's all the same issues, if that makes sense. So it's just
It
like
does.
maybe.
It makes perfect sense. So I guess the bottom line is we're about out of time here, but the bottom line is that if you are struggling with occupancy, you ought to reach out to Courtney and to Sage Age and just have a conversation about how they can help and how they work with organizations like yours. I think you look at consultants, you think they're really expensive, but you compare that cost with the cost of empty units, and I've had conversations where we talk about these empty units, and if you're in a large organization, it could be like having a whole building empty, and that is very expensive. So any final thoughts?
No, I 100% agree with you. For every community we've gone into, we've at least increased census by one per month. And if you think about that, even if it's a life care community that pays for itself, but in general, it's way more than one per month. And so it just makes sense. Plus, we're a collector of best practices. So if you're not sure what to do or you want to know what somebody else is doing, we can help understand what's innovative.
Perfect. Courtney, thank you very much. Have a
Thank you.
great holidays. I want to say thanks to Jada in the background as we close out for all her support. She makes all this happen behind the scenes. And I will see many of you on Friday with a great Foresight TV.